can hear me. Good evening and welcome to the city of Sharonville. We are going to start tonight with a public hearing. It's an appeal filed by the Kloss Entertainment LLC, doing business as Code 51, related to the nightclub licenses application denial. Mr. Pietmeyer, Mr. Donnelly, are you going to speak first?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
For the record, or for who's ever observing, Dan Donnellan from Sibley, Shillito, and Dyer as outside counsel for the city of Sharonville on this matter. And I have some hopefully good news to report. We've been talking with the attorneys for Code 51 and its ownership, and we had all come to the conclusion that since they had reportedly to us ceased business operations as a nightclub, they're open as a bar and have been for during probably the last month or so, that there's nothing preventing them from submitting a new application. And so we think it would be best to delay this appeal because if they do submit a new application and if it's approved, then the appeal would be withdrawn, it'd be moot, and they would have their license and proceed. So I just want to have council confirm that that's what our intention is here. And I apologize for having everybody come down here early instead of informing you of this before the 11th hour.
Not a problem whatsoever.
My fault.
That's all right.
And sir, if you could just give us your name,
Yes,
please,
ma'am.
for the record.
My name is Darnell Wilson, Esquire, and I represent Class Entertainments LLC. And Mr. Donnellan is correct. We've reached an agreement that will allow us to reapply for this nightclub permit and avoid having the council weigh in or vote on the matter tonight.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Your Honor.
So we can close this hearing?
We will hold it in abeyance, like continue it
Okay,
for probably, well, 2 more council meetings or
We should know, we'll know by then, because the
Yeah.
permit has to be approved within
30 days.
acted upon within 30 days, right?
So I would think if we defer it for 2 more council meetings, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah.
And then, so we're not going to close it because it's their appeal. They'd have to withdraw it.
right, but we're going,
We're concluding proceedings tonight.
okay, all right, then that's all we need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam
Thank
President.
you.
Sorry if I gotta wait for an hour to do that.
I can tell a couple jokes if you want.
Who's the entertainment now tonight? Good evening and welcome to the City of Sharonville Council, our regular council meeting. If everyone would please stand, we're going to have a moment of silent prayer and the pledge, and Mr. Shayak Duda is going to lead us in this.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can be seated. Roll call, please.
Mr. Tankersley,
Here.
Mr. Wilson,
Here.
good, Mr. Lippert,
Here.
Mr. Duda,
Here.
Mr. Cook,
Here.
Mrs. Knight. Here. And Mr. Schmidt.
Here.
Approval of our March 9th regular council meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Then those stand as written and distributed. Reports and communication, Mayor Hardman.
I'm open for any questions, but other than that, I'll defer to others.
Any questions this evening? We'll move on then to our Safety Service Director, Mr. Lucas.
Just legislation this evening. We have two items. First is to acquire more, or to purchase more road salt, $50,001. And it's really to take advantage of some of the best pricing we've had in years at $53.52 a ton. If you remember, just a few years ago, we were in the $80 and $90 range. So this has been some of the best pricing we've had. We're currently at, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, about 1,600 tons in our salt dome. And this would buy 900 more tons to get us to where we need to be in terms of a full salt dome. So I don't know if Mike's here to say anything else or answer questions about that ordinance.
Any questions? Thank you.
And then the second piece of legislation this evening is to get CT Consultants started on the engineering and design work needed for our Kemper Road resurfacing project. If you remember, that's resurfacing from Kemper, or on Kemper from Chester to Mosteller Road, along with some spot repairs, curb work, and sidewalk replacement as well. That's it this evening.
Are there any questions? Thank you. This evening, I do not have a report, so we will go on to our Clerk of Council, Ms. Spuhite.
Thanks, no report.
Thank you. We'll go to our auditor, Mr. Cunningham.
Good evening, everybody. We are 16.67% through the year, and we have spent 10.7% of that in our budget. So we are in good shape there, and there are no transfers worth mentioning for the month of February. That's my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll go on to our treasurer, Mr. Irie.
Thank you. The income tax collections year to date are down 3.94%. The motel tax collections down 38.86%. As you'll see on the comprehensive tax report, though, we are in line with our projections in terms of collections. At this point, we're roughly 16 to 17% collected. So that corresponds with where we are at this point in the year. So we're on pace there, and we are ahead of pace of the 2017 and 2018 collections at this point, only lagging behind the 2019 pace. So we're still in good shape early on in the year. That is my report.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to our law director, Mr. Pietmeyer.
Thank you. I'd like to give a brief report on why I don't give a report. There's two main things I do. One is the legislation. I know Tom Keating normally in his reports would explain what the legislation was. When I took over a little over 5 years ago, Jim asked me if I would mind if he explained the legislation. And I'm like, no, have at it. I mean, I'm more than happy. And it's probably better that Jim does, because Jim usually is the one that is the one proposing the legislation. So that's one part of my job that I don't have to report on. The second thing I do is give advice, probably on the average on a daily basis, either to someone from the tax department or the police department or the building department or Jim or somebody on some legal issue that comes up. And those are all privileged communications, so I don't talk about those. So it's not that I really don't do anything, but that's why I don't give a report.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Because I can't answer them.
Yeah. And we could just allow you to have time to give a report if you needed to and take you off the monthly thing. Okay. And tonight we have our police chief, Chief Vanover, is going to give us a report on our police department.
I can't send you a report.
You can't because I have it in writing,
Could you speed read?
minus Terry's duck.
Yeah, we'll just start with this slide here. So I handed out, good evening, everyone. So I handed out the 2020 annual report for the Sharonville Police Department to you there just a few minutes ago before the meeting. And there's a lot of data in there, and I'll send it out electronically. I'm sure you won't have time to digest it now. But there's a few slides that I want to show you and talk about a few things that went on at the police department in 2020. We spent most of the year dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, which really impacted our day-to-day operations, and you'll see that reflected in some of the stats and statistics that are contained in that report. Back in March, when COVID-19 pandemic became a thing and all of the safeguards were being put in place, we changed operations and went to pandemic emergency operations at the police department, which impacted things like we were doing limited reporting. So reports that could be taken over the telephone, or normally we would have went out and taken in person. We were taking reports over the telephone to minimize contact with the public and the public with our officers. We limited our response on emergency squad runs, emergency EMS runs, and let the fire department take care of those things where police presence wasn't necessarily required. We changed basically to a non-proactive police department for a minute there, where our officers were not doing anything proactive enforcement-wise unless they absolutely had to. We're starting to get back to normal now, and most of the safeguards were put in place back in March have been kind of reversed. And we're back taking reports in person. We're back handling our vehicle lockouts. We're back doing proactive traffic enforcement and proactive criminal enforcement. It's just going to take a minute for some of the numbers to come back a little bit there, I believe. In the middle of all this, we went through a little bit of a schedule change, trying to protect our people as best we could. And right now, you probably know we all work a 4-on, 2-off schedule, 8.5-hour days, with the rotating off days in terms of our road patrol. For a 6-week period back in, I believe it was April or May, we switched to a 12-hour schedule for a time period where we could keep some officers and employees in reserve, thinking that the pandemic was going to hit and that there was a possibility that we were going to have it hit the police department pretty hard. And so we got through that. It really helped us there for a 6-week period, and we were able to dodge, I think, a bullet to begin with. So some of the numbers that I'm going to point out here in a minute really reflect some of the things that we saw as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact it had on the police department and the city and the things that were going on in the city. The rest of my year for 2020, the big part of it was still spent finishing up the building. So we started moving into the new building in February of this year, and we moved our last component in on February 19th, which was our dispatch center. And we became fully operational there and have been out of this building now for 6 weeks, roughly 6 weeks. And we're still working through some things at the building, but we're getting accustomed, and it's wonderful. So we'd love to thank you all for your support in that project and seeing it come to fruition. And I know you guys have been through back when it was still a little bit rough, but would love to get any of you back through there again now that we're actually living in there and working out of there. And so we'll make that happen soon. So all of these slides that I'm going to show here on the screen are also contained in the report, and I will send it to you, like I said, electronically too, and an email so that you have it there. All right, Terry, I'm not moving again. There we go. Listing all of our personnel at the police department. Believe it or not, we were able to make it until the end of December without losing anybody or hiring anybody. So we basically did the full year at full staff with our full complement of 40 patrol officers, 11 civilian employees. So that was a nice, pleasant surprise. In 2021, I mean, we're already short 3 officers now. We had 3 retire, so we will be looking to replace those here in the very near future. We did have the 2 retirements at the end of December. Longtime employee of the city, Kathy Brady, who worked for several different departments in the city and finished her career in Sharonville with the Sharonville Police Department. She retired on December 28th. And then longtime Mayor's Court clerk, Linda Lutz, retired December 31st after working for the city since 1997. So losing 2 key long-term employees there with a world of knowledge. And we've working to replace those. Actually, the replacement dispatcher for Kathy Brady has already been hired, and Linda's replacement was Ann Coulter, who was the assistant court clerk, who has been promoted to the clerk of courts now, and clerk of council Terry Buhai joined the city as the assistant Sharonville Mayor's Court clerk. So both positions there have been filled and fully staffed, and we're excited about the additions we have there. We tried to maintain our presence on social media during 2020 with our viewers or our followers, I guess, up from 4,362 in 2019 to over 5,091 in 2020. Threw a slide in here with our 2 top posts that we had for the year. The top post there on the right, which was I believe a fight at Waffle House, at 84,644 post clicks on that post, which was our ¡1, I guess, viewed post last year. And I guess that tells me we probably need to put more of those kind of interesting things out there to gather more interest, garner more interest, but I don't need any more fights at Waffle House. Through the property room up here on the screen for you, it's like I say, it's in there, but there's a couple things on there that I wanted to compare to 2019. The number of guns, we recovered 60 firearms in 2020, which was up from 49 in 2019. So it's only 11 more guns, but that's still an interesting number considering that you'll see in a little bit. Some of our calls for service were down, but we were confiscating more guns. We brought in more drug items in 2020, 694 up from 491 in 2019. And those heroin needles or those needles down there, the 121, that number's up from 57 in 2019. So basically double the number of needles that were confiscated or picked up and logged into our property room. We have a whole lot more items being stored in there right now because we really didn't get rid of anything in 2020, basically because we had employees working remotely and not getting property disposals done, and then with the courts being shut down and everything else. So I think we'll see a large destruction and get rid of a lot of that property this year. Through the mayor's court citations, this is another slide that's always in your guys' packet and in the report. We're down about 500 citations issued in 2020 versus 2019. I think that number can be explained through a little bit by the minimized proactive traffic enforcement that the officers were doing because of COVID. And you'll also see that our traffic crashes were down about 500 crashes in 2020, which is a big chunk of those mayor's court citations, where normally a citation would have been issued at a traffic crash. And if we're taking less crashes, we're going to have less citations. Crime statistics, another thing that I report every year. The only real number that kind of jumped out at me was the commercial burglaries were up from 19 to 44. And I don't know if this has anything to do with businesses being closed down and employees not working in them, so they were easier targets. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that number and see where that goes. Our 2020 arrest, we were only down about 175 arrests, and the biggest drop we saw was in our juvenile arrests from 2019 to 2020, where we saw in 2019 we arrested 62 juveniles, and in 2020 we only arrested 21. And the biggest thing there, I think, is the number of juveniles that were arrested out of our schools. And since the students weren't in school, all of the crimes that are occurring in those schools caused that number to drop a little bit. Our bias-based reporting, I just want to touch on this slide for a minute. This doesn't say we're biased or anything else. This is reporting based, that's use of force that's up there now. I missed one. There we go, bias-based. Required to report this. Statistics really didn't change much. This is the breakdown of all of the individuals we have contact with for traffic offenses, criminal enforcement, criminal citations. Anytime we have contact with a person for enforcement type actions, that's where we're tracking the race and sex of all of those individuals and report that. So if you have questions on that as you digest those numbers a little bit more, be more than happy to answer those. Let's see, criminal investigations. So I think you all know, and you've seen it in my reports before, that we have the city of Sharonville broken up into 4 patrol beats. We call them beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4, and they are the 4 different colors that are on that map. Beat 1, which is the residential area, hilltop area. Beat 2 is the west side, south of Kemper Road, so it encompasses all of Chester Road and all of the hotels on the west side of town, basically. Beat 3 is everything north of Kemper Road and west or east of Reading Road, so that encompasses all of the area along Lebanon Road and 275 up to Copperfield and all the way up into Butler County. And the 4 beat is the west side of town, everything north of Kemper Road and west of Reading. Our calls for service in 2020 dropped about 2,500 calls, a little over 2,500 calls compared to 2019. Back to a level that we've seen this level before, but we had been seeing for the last 4 years, we've been seeing a steady increase in our calls for service. But we were down in number of calls for service in 2020. Our crimes by beat, you can see the breakdown here of several different crimes based on beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. There is a significant increase, or what I consider a significant increase, in the trouble calls on the 2 beat. And again, I'm going to probably liken that to maybe a result of COVID and some of the people that are being cooped up with people they might not have been cooped up with before. But we saw that number jump by about 70 in terms of the calls we get for trouble. And that could be anything from trouble with a customer at a business, trouble with a customer at a hotel, to trouble among people. And we also saw an increase, or I see an increase, in the suspicious activities that were reported on the 1 beat and the 3 beat, which are 2 of our larger residential areas, especially the 1 beat. And I'm thinking that probably has something to do with the fact that more people were home and they were seeing more things going on that they might not have seen had they been at work during the daytime or whatever. Another breakdown of some of the crimes by beat. Traffic incidents continues to be our largest drain on public services or police services, followed closely by the thefts. You can see that we had 290, when I was talking about the trouble beats there on the number, on the beat 2, you can see that we had 291 of those, and that, like I say, is a increase of about 70 of them from 2019. Our quality of life issues, so these numbers here reflect all of those things that are listed over on the left side of your screen there, the trouble runs, the noise complaints, the disorderly conduct, the menacing, the soliciting prostitution, all of those things listed make up those numbers, and I've got that broken down for you for over the last 6 years, color coded there. And you can see that some of them were up, some of them stayed about the same. And in those quality of life issues, our overdoses were up from 61 to 75 from 2019 to 2020. We more than doubled the number of doses of naloxone that we administered on our heroin overdose runs. And our overdose deaths were actually down. I believe we had 7 in 2019 and we only ended up with 5. So the officers are out there doing their part and actually using the tools that we're giving them in terms of that naloxone to hopefully have a positive impact there. I touched on this a minute ago. Our traffic crashes were down by about 503 crashes from 2019 to 2020. And if you look at the chart on the right there, I have both years displayed for you. And you can see that in January of 2020, we were actually up compared to 2019. And February, we were about the same. And then when the shutdown happened in March, we kind of had the bottom fall out of it. And April did the same thing, and we've started back up. And I did a quick check, and we're basically back to normal now in terms of the number of crashes when I looked at them from January 1 of this year to date, compared to 2019. So I think that number is going to come back. Our crashes on the interstate dropped by 243. That 344 number was 587 in 2019. So significantly less there, which is a good thing. I threw some of our hotel stats and hotel data in there. So I've been talking about all of the reduction, the reduction of over 2,000 calls for service, the reduction of 500 calls for service. But when it comes to our hotels, we didn't see any reduction in the number of calls for service. Well, we saw a reduction of 3, which I don't think is statistically significant when we're dealing with, over 2,100 calls for service at our hotels. And an interesting fact there that those 54 or 51 doses of naloxone that we administered, 68% of those patients or those people that had naloxone administered to them were staying in one of our local hotels. Breaking our hotel stats down a little bit further, I think at the last year in 2019 was the first year I gave you this slide, and it's a pretty interesting slide. It gives you a good from year to year comparison of the hotels and the number of calls for service. A few things to point out there. There's 6 hotels on that list that when you look at them a little bit closer, there's 6 of them on there that saw at least a 50% increase in the number of calls for service in 2020 compared to 2019. The highest being the Fairfield Inn, which saw a 107% increase compared to the year before, which sounds worse than it actually is because it's only up to 81 calls for service, which it's up from 39 to 81, which is a 107% increase. But it's still nowhere near our highest call for service, which is the Hometown Studios, which had 303 calls for service in 2020. And there's some things that probably could explain that number of calls for service in terms of some of the things that are going on at the Hometown Studios. And the Sonesta West was another major change. I thought a major change where their calls for service were up 93% compared to the year before. So you can have a chance to look over all of that data, dig into it a little bit more. If you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer all of those. 2021, I'm really looking forward to 2021. We moved into the new building, like I said, in February. Everybody is very, very excited about being there. That's going to be a great thing. So a lot of things to get done now that we're in there, and we're actually figuring out how we're going to use the building and getting comfortable in there. I can't thank you enough for your guys' support in making that building happen. And can't thank you enough for all of the support you've shown the police department when it comes to just being supportive and everything all the way up to and including budget and the things that we need to operate efficiently and operate at the high level of service that I think we operate at. Any questions? That's my report for now. So.
Mr.
Just
Wilson?
very quickly, I'll try to keep this short. Big year for you guys, the police department. In a time when the police across our country have been highly scrutinized, you guys keep showing that you're well-trained and that you are able to handle difficult situations without escalating problems. We've seen a few videos that really show how you guys are performing at a quality where we can all be proud of that. New uniforms, you guys look more professional, less militant to me. That may play into that some. And then a new place for you. So I noticed just looking at your mission statement, your values, do you feel like that this past year with the scrutiny on the police, has your mission statement or your values changed in any way that you know of?
I don't think so. I haven't changed our mission statement or our values, and the department knows that. I think we do an outstanding job of recruiting, hiring, and retaining the very best people. We've done, and I think we do an outstanding job of getting the best people we can get, and then training those people to operate, like you say, at that high professional level. Our training took a hit in 2019 or 2020 because of COVID. A lot of the things that we would have been training our officers in, the amount of time we would have had to have done that, the classes we normally would have sent people to, those classes all got canceled, you know. So
I think it's important that each of our officers and anyone that's involved with the police department, whether they can recite the mission statement word for word, that they have a good general understanding, would be able to summarize that mission statement, and then also be able to at least be able to say what some of our values are, whether it be verbatim or not. But I just wanted to say that I've been really proud of the way that you guys have handled yourselves this year, especially when we see so many negative things about other police across our country. And the Sharonville police have none of those things. They've showed none of those issues this year. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. What we've seen has been handled in a way that you just couldn't handle them any better. So kudos for how you guys are doing things there, and just wanted to give you a vote of confidence that I know I'm not the only one that feels that way here.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I'll get this back up there for you.
Perfect. It's an opportunity now for residents that wish to be heard this evening. Yep, you're good? Okay, thank you. Council committees, community development, Mr. Tankersley?
Thank you. I've just got two things to bring up. Gina Good has accepted the position of the Assistant HR in the City Administration Department. And also the city received notification of a grant award from the Ohio EPA in the amount of $22,500 for the installation of the electric vehicle charging stations over at the convention center. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Service, community services, Mr. Lippert.
Thank you. We are scheduled to meet on Wednesday, April 7th at 4 p.m. Currently, we're going to meet in the conference room, the administrative conference room. Mr. Blomer has told me that there is the possibility of multiple pickleballers wanting to attend the meeting. If that is the case, we will shift to somewhere at the rec center so we can be distanced. Terry, what kind of notice do you need if that occurs? Just email you? 48 hours. Okay. Thank you very
48
much.
hours.
And maybe put notes up down here just to advise people of that.
Okay.
Get it, I know Anna does a great job of getting it out on Sharonville too, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do they need more pickleball courts or?
They're requesting that. We have discussed it multiple times within the committee, and we are of the opinion that we are good as is, but they want to be heard, and that is their right.
There you go. Okay, well, I know they're always busy. They were playing in the snow. Just saying. Budget and finance, Mr. Cook?
Thank you. No report for budget and finance. For project oversight, we did meet tonight, and I'll have a report at our next council meeting.
Perfect,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Honored citizens, Mrs. Knight?
Tonight, I am going to honor all the small businesses in Sharonville because they are surviving, and I think a lot of them are thriving. I've been to several. Vicki said she went to Already Coffee today, and it was awesome. So I just, and I can speak for the Reaper stand. It's doing great too. So I just think with everything kind of, everybody getting their shots, things are opening up. So tonight I'm honoring all our small businesses.
Perfect. I saw last week as we were driving through the Wings joint over on Sharon Road. They were actually parked in the front in their grass. They had no parking. She was out of parking. They were that full. So it's good to see them doing so well also. So thank you. Law and Public Safety, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you. The next Law and Public Safety Committee meeting will be April 6th, 4 p.m. here in council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Rule suspension motion, first and only reading for ordinance 2021-22 and 2021-23E with immediate effectivity. Is there a motion? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Lippert. Any discussion? All those in favor, yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no, and that motion does carry. Unfinished business, please.
Second reading of Resolution 2021-R02, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a memorandum of understanding with other communities and organizations that comprise the Sharon Creek Collaborative to plan for, construct, and maintain the Sharon Creek Trail.
And then new business.
Sure. This is a first and only reading of ordinance 2021-22, amending 2021 appropriations for various funds. First and only reading.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2021-22? So moved by Mrs. Knight, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2021-22 has been approved. First and only reading, emergency ordinance 2021-23E, authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with CT Consultants, Inc. for the engineering and design for the Kemper Road resurfacing project and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2021-23E? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Duda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
and Mr. Duda.
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Emergency ordinance 2021-23 has been approved. This is a first reading of emergency ordinance 2021-24E, authorizing assistance to festivals of Sharonville and declaring an emergency.
Okay, there's another opportunity for anyone to be heard this evening. I don't have my mouse. Is there anybody on the? Okay, if you want to be heard this evening, raise your hand, please. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. No raised hand? Okay, we're good to go then. Are there any other matters that need to be heard this evening? Seeing none, is there a motion for adjournment? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor, yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no, and we do stand adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.